As shippers seek help in an unprecedented marketplace, Transportation Insight presents three with the SME. Three questions with our subject matter experts to offer you insight into the supply chain solutions that help your business mitigate risk, control cost, and improve customer experience.
Hi, my name is Aaron Arivett. I'm a solutions engineer with Transportation Insight, and today we're talking about inbound management.
What is the most critical aspect to a successful inbound program?
Well, I think that one of the most critical, important aspects and likely overlooked aspects of an inbound program is the change management that goes with that. Many people are focused more on just the technology or the operational aspects of that, which are both important aspects we'll talk about here today. But one of the most important things is the change management and the workload that goes with that. So change management could be vendor behaviors, inserting an automated process for you, the customer, maybe actually a manually disruptive process for the vendors. So you have to think about how that impacts your vendors and ultimately how you unwind the costs of goods from the actual freight costs. Many of your vendors are actually using that as a profit center. So when you think about the tools and techniques that go with inbound, all of those are important, but ultimately, if you have a really great system and great operations, but no vendors who are actually on the program, it really doesn't mean very much, does it?
What is the best way to gain visibility and drive compliance across a vendor group?
Well, so certainly a TMS is a part of that, but again, you must understand that there's almost never a one-size-fits-all approach as to how that information gets entered or is captured. You know, as an example, some vendors may want to integrate with the TMS to avoid introducing unnecessary manual steps that I alluded to earlier. Other vendors will be willing to simply log into the TMS and provide you information. Still yet, other vendors don't ship with enough frequency where it really merits setting them up in the TMS, and they may forget their logins and that may be more laborious for them and for you as a shipper. Ultimately, you know, some of those even may say, I won't comply with your process. Like sometimes there's that vendor that you already need more than they need you. And in that process, you may have to get more creative, a call center or having carbon copy POs, things of that nature that may allow them to minimize the amount of work they have to do to still give you the visibility and the compliance that you're looking for in your inbound program.
What do best in class inbound management programs look like and how are they achieved?
Well, I think initially people have very lofty goals when they're going to take on an inbound program. So ultimately, if you're first setting out to tackle an inbound program, I think you need to temper your compliance goals and maybe more realistic about that first phase. I think 30 to 50% compliance is a pretty good goal out of the gate, depending on your vendor mix. Best in class refines that to 70 to 90% over time through compliance. How they do that is really more around designing an easy to use inbound program, whether that's technology or otherwise. As I said, you really have to make sure you look at your vendor group to understand, what is the best fit for each vendor type based on volume, based on, the amount of engagement that they have with you, the frequency of engagement. Those types of things are going to be key aspects to how you design that program. But I think you really have to focus on the simple three key elements, which is what is ready, how much is ready, and when is it ready, right? That's the biggest three pieces that most people are missing from their information today. Most people focus on routing and things of that nature. That is important to make sure they're using the right carrier, but ultimately, to get true optimization of your inbound, you need to know from the vendors what is ready, how much is ready, and when it's ready, so that you can then begin to optimize that. Furthermore, there's really more of a 5-step evolution when you think about truly evolving an inbound program. When you look at step one of that would really be around a technology platform or a call center or both, as I alluded to earlier. Many times it is a mixture of aspects, and that can be hosted by a third party, or that can be actually something that you do within your four walls as a shipper. But you start with making sure you're getting the optimal routing, you have some consistency in in your BOLs and how they're generated, and then you leverage that, captured data for compliance reporting. That's sort of the blocking and tackling. Then there becomes the shipment visibility piece, which is now I need to make sure not only are they using the right carriers, but then I can see those shipments. I can see how many shipments I have coming in from a particular vendor or vendor groups in certain areas. And then I can provide that visibility to my doc so I understand what my workload is for inbound receiving that day, or what my flow through is going to look like for if that's an inbound outbound cross dock situation. So I think from there, step 2 is really the shipment visibility piece. And again, we talk about a variety of ways to get that visibility, whether that's user entered through integration, whether that's a call center, in-sourced or outsourced. And again, it's usually a mix of all of those. But the goal is to get that visibility, right? Again, focused on what's ready, how much is ready, and when it's ready. And then you can start to look at an additional optimization phase, which would be step 3. Step 3 is really now leveraging all that captured information and trying to identify, explore, and enact the natural inbound consolidation opportunities that exist based on your existing vendor footprint, changing nothing in your vendor footprint, but just saying what natural synergies have presented themselves now that I have visibility to those shipments. And from there, you can do some consolidation, multi-pick, et cetera. Once you've identified those, there's a deeper analysis you can do ultimately to further that, which is to then say, what aspects could I change within my vendor ship days? Because remember, you as the shipper, in this case, have the ability to control when those vendors ship, right? You don't know how long it's going to take. You might know it's a month lead time, it might be a week lead time for a product to be supplied, but ultimately you can still control what days they ship. And if you can do that, then you can change the vendor ship schedules to better align those natural synergies that you already identified, and to increase the density in those inbound consolidation opportunities. So you further added more density, more volume, and now you're increasing the ability to multi-pick and consolidate, bringing that in a more optimal state. And then the final phase that folks get into, really truly excellent inbound supply chains, move further into a cross-dock situation or leveraging a warehousing network of sorts that, whether their own facilities or a third party, for more inbound consolidation into a hub and actually bringing in, full truckloads into your facilities. So you get more consolidation centers. Now, if you already have a location that is naturally located around a great group of vendors, then I think you can use your own facilities. But in some cases, invariably, you have some vendors that are a little further away from your facilities, and you can shorten the lead time, you can shorten the mileage, and bring that in a more cost-effective way, and still get that into your distribution and supply chain. So, when you look at those 5 steps, those are really the evolution of an inbound program. Those take time, but that's how people get from 30 to 50% up to 70 to 90%. I would say lastly, you really need to stratify the vendor base that you're working with and think about the ones who are willing to work with you versus the ones that are more reluctant to follow the process, like the carrot or the stick, right? So the carrot is really to entice vendors that this program will help you measure, improve, and potentially grow their business with you. And in that sense, they're willing to work with you and partner with you in this new initiative, and you get better buy-in from that change management I alluded to at the top of the call. From a stick perspective, most programs have to have some type of teeth or penalties in the program, right? And so for those who don't comply, there needs to be some mechanism to keep them in line and say that if you don't adhere to this program, then there are some potential penalties. You can still choose when you enact them, if you give them a 3-strike rule or not, whatever the case may be. But typically, a process that goes unmeasured or unchecked will fall out of control limits. And you have to have something that keeps that in process. You think the big companies out there like Walmart and others have very stringent, extremely painful penalties. And a lot of people don't like that aspect of doing business with Walmart. But ultimately, at the end of the day, everyone understands what's expected of them, and they do their best to hit it because of those penalties or those alignment compliance mechanisms. So I think when you get to that point, figure out which of the vendors fit into the carrot versus the stick methodology. And then I think overall, as you're working through this, you need to make sure you're keeping your carrier strategy and the alignment of that strategy especially in the LTL market, but across all modes, ideally optimized with your changing footprint. So as that footprint changes, or even in initial phase when you're taking over more of that inbound, we're talking today about if you already control this inbound program, but if it's an inbound program that you don't control, the change management that I alluded to at the top of the call is going to be much more complicated because you're having to go in and invade your vendor bills to ultimately determine how much you're paying for freight, which most vendors don't want to tell you. By the way, they're probably making a margin on that. And that's then going to affect the price of cost of goods. And so there's unraveling a program you don't control takes a bit more work. But ultimately, you want to make sure, regardless, that the carrier strategy you have is aligned with where you are today and then remains aligned with whatever changes you make in your footprint.
During the current never normal environment, you need partners who can evolve your solution to meet the challenges you face today while anticipating the problems that loom on the horizon. Whether your organization is large or small, we have a solution for you. To learn more about Transportation Insight supply chain strategies, visit us online at transportationinsight.com or join us for our next digital event.